Hello everyone and welcome to another Focus Mark 1 video. Very predictably on this channel. How predictable? Anyway, this time I want to cover a subject that I actually covered before, and that was Focus Mark 1 common problems in the engine bay gearbox department underneath the bonnet. I have covered this video before about a year and a half ago, way over a year and a half ago now. It was in the really early days of the channel. Where I didn't think that video would get many views, but I thought I would talk about it because there were a lot of things that I can point out. This time I'm going to go back over the subject, but I'm not going to repeat myself an awful lot. I may repeat some things, but I'd rather just do it again, but a bit more up to date. And I like to update my videos just a little bit. So for those of you who get bored by watching the repeated stuff, don't worry, you're not going to get too bored on this one. So let's get cracking. I'm going to just point out many things that you need to know within the engine bay department, things that you need to look for, and just my own insight in this. But anyway, let's go and have a look. Very nice indeed. 50 Shades of Panther Black. Just an update, guys. I have fitted a proper door mirror with a removable cap. I've painted it up in Panther Black. Fantastic. I think that was Halford's paint. Halford's still stock Ford Panther Black because it's such a long-lived colour. So I'm really pleased about that. So fantastic. Seats look absolutely amazing. In fact, having the car turn around this way makes the interior look absolutely amazing. I'm really chuffed to bits with those seats. The leather dye, guys. If any of you have got leather seats in your Focus and you're thinking, I need to repair these. I had to do some stitching on that passenger seat because some of the stitches had started to come away. I had to whip the seat covers off. It was a bit of a faffy exercise. Unfortunately, I've already done that job, but no doubt I may do that job on somebody else's car one day. It took a long time, and there's a reason why redying and repairing an interior set could cost you about $1,500, maybe more from a trimmers, because it's labour intensive. But if you can do it yourself and put the hours in yourself, it will cost you probably £100–200, especially in a dye kit. The amount of dye kit and the airspray that you get, it's like the sort of if you're doing like miniature figurines, and the sort of air can spray gun aerosols that you get. But this was from Furniture Clinic. So top tip before we start. Anyway, that's the interior done. Let's get into the bonnet, and as we usual, be very, very careful with a Focus Mark 1, especially if you've got the wrong keys in your hands. And I don't know where they've gone now. Where have they gone? Right, got the right key. Now, be very careful with this lock. Now, the usual thing when you buy a Focus Mark 1 is be extremely careful with the lock. They're very reliable cars, these, as we all know, and that means getting into the bonnet may not happen from one MOT to the next, or that was common. Shouldn't be as common now, though. I think people should be opening their bonnets a bit more because there's quite a few problems that I'm going to explain in this video. So I think this is a good place to start. But if you have a Mark 1 with a broken lock, it's already broken before you bought it, long screwdriver goes straight through that shaft in there. Okay, I will demonstrate that a little bit, but mine is nice and free. GT85, guys, is what is required. Let me just lift that. There we go. Okay, lovely. So that's what's required. Now, if we see down here, there is a bit of a sort of shaft that goes into the lock. Okay, it goes from the back of this the lock, and it's a shaft that goes through. That spindle is, that shaft is so thin that if you've got excessive gunk down there, I would recommend a degunking session. Spend about an hour on that. I'm not joking. An hour degreasing, cleaning, and then GT85 at that end in here. We want all this clean. We don't want any of this gunged up. It's half the problem with opening cars. I have to say, people go on about the key thing like it's an inherent flaw. it's only an inherent flaw if you don't look after it, like many things. I mean, I'm not being funny. I actually quite prefer this to the cables that I have in this and the Fiesta Mark III, because cables can snap, but nobody goes on about cables. You just, you know, it's a bit of a faff. People replace the cables, but for some reason people go banging on about that. I'm not sure why. Just lubricate the lock. It's usually down to lack of maintenance as usual, not the design of the car. Then we are presented with a lovely engine bay, very nicely presented and very organised. And I think that sums up a Mark 1 Focus perfectly. You have this completely alien exterior compared with what had gone before, completely different. So you want something a bit more conventional and familiar inside. And actually, if you open up the engine bay and you compare this engine bay with, let's say, an Escort, it's very familiar. Now this engine, this Sigma, was never fitted to the Escort. It was only the Zetec engines that would be more familiar, but they look very much similar, apart from the exhaust being at the front and the inlet, all this being at the back side. But essentially, very similar engines in appearance. The Zetec engines, the 1.82 litre and the Focus, kind of stick out a little bit more to the end of the chassis rail. It is very difficult to get down that side, whereas the 1.4, 1.6, there's a little bit more space. There is a common misconception in the 1.4, 1.6 that the 1.6 engine is bigger. It's bigger in the engine bay. It's not. It's the same size of engine. It's just been bored out a bit, okay? They always had capacity to bore this engine out, because the Sigma, this engine started as the 1.25. Again, the 1.25 Sigma that started in the Mark IV Fiesta in 1995, that engine, it's the same size as this. It's not any smaller, trust me. So all they did is they designed the engine perfectly to adjust for different sizes and capacities. The idea that this engine would eventually just kill off, well, the CVH had already been killed off by the Zetec. The CVH PTE, as it was called, there was a few little changes towards the end with the CVH in Europe. That died a death in 1996 and was replaced effectively by the Zetec engine first and foremost. This engine was designed to kill off the Kent, which it did. Well, it basically kicked it into touch permanently. And it required to be kind of in different capacities. So the 1.25 effectively replaced the old 1.3 Kent engine, the HCS, or the Enduro engine as it was somewhat called towards the end. And then you would have a higher 1.4 capacity in the Fiestas especially. You could get them in a Mark 1 Focus and a Mark II Focus, but they are a little bit marginal, but they're not too bad. They're not as bad as what people say. They are slightly underpowered, but they're not that bad. I will tell you that. 1.6s are the niche. This was what this car was designed for. I think when the Focus Mark 1 first came out, I think most of the examples you would have seen demonstrated to the press would have been a 1.6. The 1.82 litre Zetec engines were a bit niche, and I don't think they would have been as popular, especially as that engine was already several years old, and it was... The Zetec engine was a great engine for the Escort and the Fiestas of the 90s. But in the Focus, it was an engine that they kept producing, but it wasn't really... It was kind of yesterday's news, really. The Sigma kind of showed the world that, well, Ford can make an all-aluminium engine and can make it very successfully, and it had been successful in the Mark IV Fiesta. So it kind of kicked that into touch, and people moved on, and that engine slowly died off in 2004, 2005, I should say, with the end of the Mark 1 Focus. So essentially, that's your engines, really. The 1.6 is the kind of the pick of the bunch, really. And this is typical. I mean, you've got... I mean, I can see here with the cardboard underneath. I mean, there's tons of room. Absolutely tons of room. The Zetec engine does sit further forwards. The branch manifold is very, very close to the heater fan here. It does kind of sit forwards, and it sits a bit more flatter. The Sigma, as you can see, is kind of canted backwards at an angle. Weird positioning, very weird. It's why unfortunately you've got to be careful of rocker cover leaks, because rocker cover leaks can either go, well, usually it won't go down the front of the engine. It will go into the spark plugs, or on this bank, it will go straight down the back of the engine because it's canted at that angle. So naturally the oil is going to go that way as opposed to coming down the front. On the Zetec engines, the oil can leak from anywhere. Because it's quite a flat engine, it could leak from the front, back or sides. It's a weird one. So in that respect, a Sigma eliminates the fault of leaky rocker cover gaskets from the front, unless it's really, really bad. If it is leaking from the front, just where your injectors are down here, if you see any oil from your rocker cover, that is some serious rocker cover fault, that is, and you need to change it. The engine bay, the layout is very, very nice. There's a lot of access. It was very much designed in principle of keeping the servicing as simple as possible, as per most Fords of the 80s, 90s. That, yeah, let's face it, Ford didn't produce some amazing cars in that period. They took their customers for granted. They spent more on the marketing than actually designing really good cars, and they rested on their laurels quite a bit. This car changed all that. Anyway, that's a story for another day. But the conventionality underneath the bonnet is there for all to see. Everything is so accessible. There's nothing in the way of, oh, I need to remove that panel to access that panel. The only one that I would say is a bit of a frustration are the diesel models. The diesel models have an under tray underneath. That is annoying. I hate under trays. You hate under trays. That's got one. I hate it. You have to take it off to change the blooming oil filter. It's annoying. But this engine doesn't have any of that. In terms of getting access to a few components, I don't think there's anything in the engine bay that really I have to disturb to get to another component. The main one for me is the automatic gearbox. Because you have this dipstick for the gearbox down here, the problem with this dipstick is because if you want to change your starter motor on a 1.6 auto, and I have removed this starter motor, cleaned it up and rebuilt it. That's the original starter motor. That's the original alternator. Fingers crossed. So I've rebuilt that with new brushes, and you can get them quite easily, I can assure you. And that starter motor sounds so free and less. It was so gummed up before; it sounded completely different. Now it spins. It actually sounds. You sort of release the key after the engine starts, and the starter motor is still whizzing around for half a second. It's amazing. It sounds fantastic. But to get to one of the starter motor bolts down where my finger is, you have got to move the dipstick up. So you've got to take a bolt out for the dipstick. But to get to that bolt, you've got to remove another bracket. You've got to remove the battery tray. You've got to get all that out the way to get to a bolt to move a bracket. Then you can get to the bolt to move this dipstick up to get to the last bolt of the starter motor. That, ladies and gentlemen, if you've got a 1.6 automatic, you have to be aware about. It's a pain in the ass. It takes far longer than what it should. On the manual gearboxes, you don't have to worry because you don't have a dipstick there, obviously, and therefore you can get the starter motor out with a lot less hassle. But just a word of warning, that's one of the most fiddly and stupid jobs I've had to do on a Mark 1 so far. There are very few things that I've had to take other bits off to get access to. And I'm trying to think of things really that I've encountered, but there isn't. There really isn't. You know, your coolant hoses are very, very, you know, exposed, and everything's handy in place. I mean, if you want to change your power steering fluid, you just wiggle the bottle, and you just take that bottom hose out, and just put it back in there on the grommets. That's it. There's really nothing much that will get in your way. The fuse box is very basic, as I said in the last episode, with standard sized fuses instead of those micro fuses, micro blade fuses. But obviously back obviously in the Mark II, they wanted to save a bit of space, so this fuse box might be half the size with micro fuses. The air filter box is so easy that I could teach a child how to do an air filter. In fact, I've got a feeling that was the first job I did on this car, is I actually bought an air filter from Halfords, and I just took 1, 2, 3, 4 screws out. Just be careful if you've got a MAF sensor, because you obviously just be careful of this wiring. Usually just take it off. You can do that. and you can put the air filter in very easy indeed. That's a very easy job. If you wanted to teach somebody how to work on a car, I would recommend a Ford of this age, not necessarily a Focus, but it could be a Fiesta or a KA, but I would probably start with this sort of engine, because all LE engines are now common as muck, and if you want somebody to understand about car engines a bit more, then it's a good place to start. It's a safe place to start. Everything down there is accessible with the oil filter, etc. Now, there are a few things really to note straight away in the engine bay. I'm just going to point these out because this is a bit of an update on what I said before. The chassis legs on this car are quite thick. I mean, that is quite a thick leg, actually. Now, usually these don't bend. The usual advice when you're buying one of these, or any car of this age really, is to check the chassis legs to see if they're bent. Trust me, if the chassis legs are bent, you need to walk away, because that crash bar in a frontal accident should take the full impact. That crash bar is held on by 4 bolts. It's detachable, removable, and you can swap it for a better one. If you've had a bump, obviously your bumper's going to be trashed, the grill's going to be trashed. Your slam panel might need replacing. We're not quite sure whether it might or not. It depends on the severity, but they're all replaceable. This slam panel is replaceable with a couple of bolts down here and a couple of bolts down there. The bumper's obviously, you know, replaceable. Obviously, it would be a good day's work, but it would be done, and you'd have a car at the end with a new slam panel, new front end. Probably have to be sprayed up to match the rest of the car, but it's all good. But if you've got a bent chassis leg, if the impact has been so bad that crash bar was buckled in, your radiator will be gone. The radiator will not exist after that, to the point where the chassis leg is bent. I think I'd rather scrap the car, because that's too much then. That you're going into a whole world of trouble. But I wouldn't worry about that too much, because it is quite a strong crash structure. It wasn't the most amazing Euro NCAP result, but it was a good result for Ford, and it was a good enough result that they could attract customers with that rating. Now, it was a 4-star rating, I believe. Now, it wasn't exactly 5 stars, but it was 4. It was good enough. And I've seen a few Mark 1s in crashes recently, and sadly, the good thing is they actually can stand up to quite a fair impact, even at this old age. So, you know, fair enough. Anyway, in terms of the engine bay, there's a few things that I kind of just want to go over again that's happened recently within the community. Okay, engine mountings. Okay, now this engine mounting is a hydraulic one. You'll get one on all the petrol models and possibly the diesel ones. Okay, this hydraulic mounting, it's got a rubber at the bottom. Okay, we've got this rubber bit at the bottom. Check it for cracking. Okay, usually they crack quite prematurely. I think this one may... Nope, it hasn't started cracking. I'm lucky. It's been on the car 3 years. This is a Febby Bilstein £35 one. They're the ones I go for. Febby Bilstein are really good, and this engine mounting has been on the car 3 years and about 6,000 miles, and it's looking good. It's okay. It won't be doing that many miles anyway. But the sign is at the top is you got the oil, which is in the body bit here. What you need to do is look around here for signs of oil. If it's leaking oil, you need to change it, because the whole idea is that the oil is absorbing vibrations, and you will feel that in the cabin. So if you've got excessive vibrations in the cabin, more than normal, and you've noticed oil there, £35, change it out. You'll need to take the bracket out. There's a bolt here, there's a bolt over here, and there's a bolt just under the bottle. You have to take the coolant bottle out the way, okay? It's the only thing. Just hook the bottle out the way. It takes 2 seconds. Take that bolt out, and then obviously support the engine. 1, 2, 3. Take this clip out. By the way, guys, be very careful, because this clip has a habit of breaking where it holds the cable. I've got about 3 of these because they break so regularly. The plastic just goes so brittle. Some people don't have them fitted at all, but I prefer to have it fitted since it was a standard fitment. But there's literally 3 nuts there, and it will drop. The engine will drop, and you'll be able to remove the engine mounting. And there's a big bolt that holds that engine mounting underneath. You're going to need a good breaker bar and a foot on the floor to break that off, or an impact gun, because I think it's a 21mm or 19mm, if I'm not too wrong about that. And it does need to be torqued up when you're swapping the old mounting off and then putting the new one onto this bracket here. Okay, and you could give it the bracket a bit of a paint up as well. That's the idea. In terms of other engine mountings, the gearbox mount, which you cannot see barely down there, that is the swing mount. Okay, the idea is to have the car in gear, give it a bit of a rev with the brake off and see how much the engine sort of moves backwards. It will cant back a little bit, but it shouldn't be that much. If it's literally jumping back, that needs replacing. Okay. The other one, and this makes a huge difference, is the gearbox mount underneath the airbox. And if I could just whip this airbox, this now seems very reluctant to move. Blimmin' heck, what's going on here? Right, for some reason the plastic legs seem, unfortunately it's a very cold day today, and the plastic legs seem to have, yes, it's going to need a bit more shaking. But the idea is you shake the airbox off and it's just standing on there. It's not mounted down. The gearbox mount is underneath. That gearbox mount can cause a lot of problems. Don't buy aftermarket ones. Please don't get cheap ones of them. Febby Bilstein, £35. The one at the back should cost about 30 quid, possibly from Febby Bilstein. This one, they also make it. Get a Febby kit. That one, and that one. If you have a day where you're changing that one underneath the car, and that one, if you change all three, you'll have a huge difference. That will be one satisfying day, I can tell you, because the noise will be lower, the vibration in the cabin will be lower, and you will feel the difference, believe you me, if you are still on your original mount, and it's very possible at this stage. So have a go. This side is the same, just as I say, once you've done that one and that one, then you need to jack up the gearbox. There's a centre bolt and 4 bolts. The 4 bolts bolt the mount to the body, and the centre one connects the mount to the gearbox. What you do first of all is you take off the centre one, the centre nut, and then you undo the 4. When you take off the centre one, the gearbox will drop because the gearbox has lost its connection to the mounting. And then you take the 4 bolts out, whip it out. It's literally a plate, a metal plate with a mounting on top of it. That makes a huge difference as well, believe it or not. That one makes the most difference. That one will make a difference when moving off, and that one will also make a considerable amount of difference. So there you go, there's your 3 mountings, and I would recommend that if you haven't done it, you do have an afternoon changing them over. It's something that I'm possibly going to do for somebody else on his Focus, because like everything else, I've done it all with this car. Now, as an update, the other point is this. Now, this is an update video. A lot of people have watched that video where I mentioned about the 2-litre automatic air deflector, which is what this panel is. Usually you won't have this bit, you'll just have there won't be anything here. The air will just get sucked in at this point. This takes air from lower down, colder, denser air. It was only fitted to the 2-litre automatics, potentially because of they need a little bit more cold air, because they might be a bit more used for towing abilities, put it that way. Although I will say, if you've got an automatic, please do not tow anything. You will absolutely knacker the gearbox out. I do not consider any of the automatic gearboxes, whether the 1.6 or the 2-litre engine, it's the same gearbox. They do not like towing. They will overheat. You will break the gearbox. They are not for high torque applications, so please don't tow using an automatic Focus. If you want to do some towing, get a manual or a diesel model, please. Now, this air deflector, it does help an awful lot, and a lot of people have been messaging me about what the parts number is. Now, I have got the parts number somewhere. I've got to find it. The truth is, I don't think there's any point, because the last time somebody else checked on my behalf, they'd all run out. I wonder why that was. So basically, people after that video have been buying them up, and there's none left. There are ones out there, no doubt, but the ones on eBay are all gone. So you're going to have to ask Ford directly if you want this panel. But it is a very nice, subtle modification, and I think it should have been rolled out across all the models, because having colder, denser air in an engine is just beneficial for the engine, which is why, I'm sorry, the cone filter boxes, you need to ditch them. If anyone has a Mark 1 Focus and you've got that cone air filter box, yes, I know it sounds a bit more boomy and rorted, but you know, you possibly think it sounds nicer, but it's not going to go nicer. In the summer, that is just going to bog down, suck all the hot air out the engine bay, and you're getting hot, less dense air going in your engine. It's going to run rubbish. Mine did. I had a pipe across there, but you've got to get one with a cage. And at the moment, as far as I'm concerned, unless you have a custom one built for Mark 1 Focus, there is no cage for an air filter box. Can somebody please correct me if I'm wrong on that one? But I don't think there is. I don't think there is a custom-made cage at the moment for Mark 1 Focus to prevent a cone filter sucking in engine bay air as such. So I just don't agree with them. If you want to go on a K&N or pipe across filter, you get the panel filter. It's built into here. You can't see it. You have to clean it and oil it every so often. Okay, it is good for the environment. I agree. Instead of using disposable paper filters, it is buy it, clean it, oil it, and keep doing that. It's a recyclable, item. I agree, and that's probably a good thing. And they probably, from what I've been told, give a bit more boominess to the car. So if you want to do a subtle mod, then you do that. You do a panel filter. I've got no problems with that. The only thing you've got to be very aware of with a panel filter is your MAF sensor. If you have a MAF sensor, you are going to have to clean the MAF sensor, because the oil off that filter may build up on that hot wire. It's a hot wire element. You must clean it. Okay, get a fiberglass pen and gently clean the element every so often, because that will interfere with the readings on that sensor. And actually, it could burn the sensor out because it's a hot wire element, and if it's got a film on it, it could end up doing damage to itself and burning out all the circuit board in here, which is very sensitive. So bear that in mind, please. But that's the only thing you need to be aware of. If you don't have a MAF sensor and you have a map sensor, I think a map sensor is a bit more robust in that sense, and it's not in the direct line of fire here from the airbox, because it's going to get dirty, isn't it? Underbonnet insulation. Okay, right. So as far as I'm concerned, I suspect that this car never came out the factory with insulation. Some people have got underbonnet insulation, diesels, gears, usual. I think quite a few Z-Techs have got it, but in my opinion, throw it in the bin. Because every single one that I've seen, I'm all for originality, and if you've got it and it's in good condition, then just clean it up. But for me, they look ragged. It's like the carpet that goes along here. I've thrown this carpet in the bin because it gets all ripply and dusty. It's horrible. It's vile. Throw it in the bin if you can, because it made my engine bay look absolutely dreadful. And I'm glad I did, and it made absolutely no difference. And this makes very little difference whatsoever. I have actually seen this firsthand, where someone has actually taken off their insulation, and we've listened to the engine note, just standing from the same sort of distance to keep it a fair test, and we noticed a slight more audible nature to the engine. That's not necessarily a bad thing. People are sticking pipe across at cone filters because they want a bit more induction sound. Take this off, and you'll hear a bit more. So, you know what I mean? So, it's a cheap fix, and the truth is, they always get a bit funny around here. So, if you've got your underbonnet insulation around here, it gets a bit tight against this air filter pipe, and for some reason, it starts fraying off. So, be very careful about your underbonnet insulation. It is probably a good idea in the winter, especially at this time, particularly if your car is still in daily use. But it's whether it was fitted or not fitted, I wouldn't really worry about it, because I actually prefer the look without the insulation. I can give this a nice polish up every so often, and it will look absolutely amazing. I might need to give this a bit of a sort of wet sand in places, but overall it looks absolutely fantastic. Anyway, I'm going to leave that here, because there isn't a great deal that I have to add other than what I've said. And I'm going to leave that episode here. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, this sort of slight update to the engine bay. Not necessarily common problems, but things that I keep picking up regularly. And the thing is, as a YouTuber, YouTubers are very reactive people. We react to news coming in and stories and things happening within the car community around us, and we think, do you know what, that's a good idea. I'll just discuss this or talk about this. And there are quite a few things, like the things that I've talked about today, that have actually come up since I made that lovely episode that everybody has watched about engine bay common problems with Mark 1 Focuses. Which was, again, so long ago, a year and a half ago. So many things have come up, and just a few things that I think worth mentioning again, because these problems do keep coming up, and the same questions are being asked. So I thought I would kill a few birds with one stone. Anyway, you take care, guys. I'm going to get out of here because I'm freezing. It's really cold, even for this time of the year. You take care, guys. I will see you in another Mark 1 episode very soon. Take care.